firstly, why do you feel there is a lack of methodology and depth of understanding about how to extract the true value and competitive edge from sourcing? Do you think it's a lack of skills, a disconnect between departments, or maybe just all of those things?
Let's say 5 years ago, we were very much in a situation where the world was complicated, competition was there. There was always something going on for sure in the business world that companies needed to adapt to. But that was very much built into the vision, the model that companies had in mind. In other words, it's like you're driving a Formula One. A lot of things can happen, but you're going to stay on the track. Companies are starting to realize that, okay, maybe I'm not driving a Formula One, and maybe I'm not driving that vehicle on a track. It's more like off-road situations. I have to be ready for the unexpected. That changes drastically the way you structure your company. That changes drastically your strategy and the way that you want to implement it.
One of the biggest concerns that CPOs have, for example, is not in building supply chain resilience for the long term, but addressing more immediate and current problems.
Once you've understood where you want to go, then you can look at your strategy. And then once you understand your strategies, you can start looking at your tool set, as in which platforms align to those strategies.
We've had technology available for plus 25 years by now. So I think any procurement function need to adapt this digital first mindset when it comes to sourcing. Technology is what will address and automate and fix some of these constraints that we see right now with us trying to do everything at once in a manual way.
Generally, if someone's joining a sales role, for example, or a finance role, the requirements both before and after university are more defined. And the procurement is an area where people are still finding their feet in terms of apprenticeships or institutional programs that people use to get up to speed.
A number of surveys came out each year of CPOs who are saying, we don't believe that we have the necessary skills and the requirements to deliver to our strategic objectives. And that was before the pandemic. So when you look at that particular problem, you know what? A people problem depends upon, are you investing in education? Are you investing in training?
Simply because there's a million priorities if you work in procurement these days. We have the cost agenda. We need to secure supply. We have other priorities around, for example, ESG. So it seems like procurement is drowning in work, and that has an impact that sometimes we maybe cut corners when it comes to sourcing. It's easier to do it quick and dirty rather than following the methodology that the company have adopted.
You've also got the question of how much you mandate the tools. I think my view on this personally has changed over the last 13 years to believe in maybe a bit more firmness and rigor in terms of what tools procurement should use. Within the sales and finance profession, this is very well understood that you need to use this tool to raise an invoice. Procurement really should have the same kind of remit in terms of you should use this tool to run a tender.
But if we really want to drive a professional process and also get the optimal deal for our company, especially in these times with talks about recession, etc., we need to leverage competition. And that includes both asking suppliers, it also includes the type of feedback we provide during the process, and of course also in the negotiation phase, where I'm a strong advocate for a market-driven negotiation process in the shape of the use of e-auctions. But now with, again, the need to claw back some of these inflationary increases in cost, with the recession moving in, some countries are already in recession. Everybody is focusing on cost, and there is simply no easier, better, more efficient way to claw back cost savings down to, and I'm finding the right market level, than pushing the use of auctions.
I think that some companies have stronger silos between departments, and it's not just between finance and procurement and finance and the business and everything. It could be wider than that. It's very rare that you can do something by yourself within an organization. And it's very rare that a department itself can do something by itself on an organization. And by the way, it's very rare that a company alone can do something and change the world. In other words, you have to collaborate with other people, other departments, your supply chain partners, your customers, the suppliers, etc. When situations change, weaknesses that may have previously been existing but not appearing because fundamentally those weaknesses were not important relative to the situation that businesses were in. As the situation changes, and maybe we'll come back to that, but the situation today in the business world has changed drastically. And so when that happens, well, the weaknesses do appear. And they become evident, and people are like, well, we should have done something about it long ago, which is true, but nobody did anything because it wasn't worth it at the time. It is now.
There's always a fear of change, especially when we then talk about the use of technology. We all know how it is. We're all human, and we have our habits, and we know where we are comfortable, and then suddenly changing that with something as important as, for example, the annual tender that I run as a category manager, I can completely understand why people would have reservations against that. But it is a bit a catch-22 because all of these priorities that everybody in procurement is exposed to these days creates more work. The solution to that is technology, and it do require a change and an adoption of technologies.
Let's look at the core principles of sourcing that enterprises should be thinking about adopting. Specifically, what strategies, tools, and skills are needed from your perspective?
I think there's a number of myths that have to be addressed as well. One of them being that strategic sourcing is just a cost-focused exercise. I actually see it being much more than that today. There's tons of risk evaluation as well as part of strategic sourcing projects. Evaluations around, well, we can't just go with one supplier, even though there's a saving, we have to spread it out across multiple so we don't end up in single source situations, which can be painful. I think we've all experienced that over the last couple of years. And then again, there's relationships that need to be taken into account, their ESG parameters. So all in all, I would argue that strategic sourcing is actually more interesting and complex than ever before. Back in the days, it was mostly a cost exercise. But today, it's a much more sophisticated process that has to take many more things into account. And again, it just makes it so much more exciting to work in this field.
What is your strategy at the company level? And how does that strategy translate to what it is you're trying to do within the procurement department and in that particular sourcing event that you're trying to do? What I'm trying to say is, what you want to do has to make sense, not for you. It has to make sense relative to what the company you're working for wants to do, which has to make sense relative to what the situation around you, using broader terms, is at the point of execution.
You've got a kind of pull methodology. So you could look at, for example, how procurement is promoted internally within the business and trying to encourage people as to why they should use procurement as a way to add value rather than as a blocker.
To collaborate on a exercise that involves change, you have to do change management. And I know it's a classical point to make, but it's a fundamental point to make. You are not going to change anything if you're doing it alone or even against the others. And a lot of people, in a lot of cases, will disagree or have resistance or concerns about what it is you're trying to do. It's true in sourcing, it's true in everything. So just like you need to understand the why am I doing this? You need to understand how I'm going to do this. And so how I'm going to get the help that I need from other departments, other people to get what I need to do accomplished. And that's fundamental. And again, the tool itself is not going to give you those answers.
You've got within the team to drive the use of the right tools and techniques through KPIs.
So yeah, you have to win the hearts of people. And to win the hearts, you have to explain why you're doing it. You have to show consistency, unity, alignment within the company to avoid potential, unhealthy situations or political games. It's very important. So to your point, if top management, C-level people, and even the board are not aligned, and I would go even further, if the company's message to its employees and to the world is not aligned to what you're trying to do, you're going to face resistance. You're not going to be in the position to succeed.
I think it's very important for senior leadership to fully back procurement, and so the organization as a whole understands its value.
So when you talk about strategic sourcing, don't think about the product or what you're trying to source. Think about from whom you're sourcing the product and how you're building up that relationship of certainty and clarity and visibility.
When we make our decisions, it's extremely critical, and it sounds obvious, but it's also just not happening all the time, that we institutionalize the use of data as our foundation for decisions. If we have done a truly data-driven sourcing process, we can present the options to the stakeholders and say, if we do this scenario, this is the cost. If we do this scenario, we can save X, and that could be millions of dollars extra. Are you sure you're not willing to change and adapt if our company can benefit from it in this way? So I don't think we should underestimate the value of data also internally when we have dialogue with our stakeholders in operations, in the business, in finance, etc.
And to interrupt, going back to the days of the early ERP days, which it was a technology challenge, data was very slow to reach the procurement department. It would take 3 to 6 months to get out of the ERP into the front lines, and by that time, the shelf life had expired. We don't have that. We don't have that excuse anymore. The technology is seamless. The information is instantaneous. We have that information. We just don't know what to do with it or how to do with it.
Yeah, very true. Thank you.